I've always been the best-natured slob in the world. Of course I have pity. But now I've seen the light. It isn't my old kind of pity, the kind yours is. It isn't the kind that lets itself off easy by encouraging some poor guy to go on kidding himself with a lie. The kind that leaves the poor slob worse off because it makes him feel guiltier than ever. The kind that makes his lying hopes nag at him and reproach him until he's nothing but a rotten skunk in his own eyes.
Kevin Spacey is here, though he has had a very successful film career starring in such movies as The Usual Suspects, L.A. Confidential, and others. The stage, for him, has always been his first love. He made his Broadway debut in 1982 with Ibsen's Ghost, followed by Long Day's Journey into Night, co-starring with Jack Lemmon. In 1991, he won a Tony for his performance in Neil Simon's Lost in Yonkers. After 8 years, he is back on Broadway in one of the most acclaimed performances of the season. He is in The Iceman Cometh. Here is the performance.
But here's the point to get. I swear I'd never act like I have if I wasn't absolutely certain it will be worth it to you in the end. When you're rid of the damn guilt that makes you lie to yourselves you're something you're not, and the remorse that makes you hide behind lousy pipe dreams about tomorrow. Brothers and sisters, this piece is real. It's here inside me. You all know what I was like. You remember me. Even when I was drunk and had 2 quarts of rock gun under my belt and joked and sang Sweet Adeline, I still felt like a guilty skunk. But you can all see that I don't give a damn about anything anymore. And I promise you, by the time this day is over, I'll have each and every one of you feeling exactly the same way.
I am pleased to have Kevin Spacey back on this program to talk about this extraordinary performance in one remarkable play. Welcome.
Thank you.
Last time you were here, you said that you needed to get back to the theater for discipline and other reasons. Have you found that? I mean, what has been great about being back, other than the fact that you've got a great part and great words to work with?
Well, it does start there. It starts with having something that continues to ask the best of yourself every day. So that starts with O'Neill's incredible words and the way in which he structures this play that makes it so fun for all of us to show up there every night. And I've now been doing it in sort of 3 different incarnations. We began it at the Almeida Theatre in London, which was a 293-seat theater. Then we transferred it to the Old Vic, which is well over 1,000 seats. Had 6 new cast members there, and now we've come to New York with 14 new American company members. And it has been astounding to me how in each time that we've tackled it, the play has remained intact. The production is essentially the same, even though we have different interpretations. Familiar lines coming from new faces, which is always very thrilling.
Does it, in a way, recharge the batteries that exist within an actor's equation?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I feel like I've been given a whole new battery, not just recharging it. It's sort of, on so many different levels, it's everything that I ever dreamed the theater could be. The production, what Howard Davies has done, his ability to work with a company of 19 actors and form a real unit and cohesive ensemble.
The idea of doing this, did it choose you or did you choose it?
It chose me. The way this happened, I have to go back some 17 or so years to an audition I had as a young actor for the Broadway production of Les Liaisons Dangereuses. And I was brought in to possibly replace Alan Rickman, who had originated the role. And Howard Davies was directing this production. And both he and Christopher Hampton, the playwright, felt that they had found their replacement in me, and I was the guy. And I was very excited because I hadn't, at this point, really done anything in the theater of any significance. It would have been really one of the first jobs that I had. And so they presented me to the producers, who promptly said, "Who? We need a name. We need to sell tickets. We've never heard of this guy. I mean, he may be good, but you know, we can't let you do this." And they fought rather diligently for myself and an actress who was quite well known off Broadway, but not really well known on Broadway. And they rejected both of us. And Howard and Christopher were so angered by that they were unable cast the 2 actors they wanted, that they closed the production. It didn't go on with an American company. And that actress, by the way, was a little-known actress who opened in a movie a couple of weeks later called Fatal Attraction. Glenn something, I think was her name.
Could be close.
Yeah. And so I then, about 2.5 years ago, found myself in London, sitting in the audience at the Almeida, watching a production of Ivanov with Ralph Fiennes, Chekhov's play, and it was a fantastic production. It was a big cast, and I just believed the world that they had created, and they were excellent, and I was very excited by it, and it made me jealous, and I instantly said, gosh, this is the place I'd love to come and work. And I've been looking for the right venue, the right theater. A lot had changed in my profile as a film actor. You know, I'd been asked to do a play here or there, but it either wasn't the right circumstance, or it put me too on the chopping block, I felt, and I didn't want to come back under those circumstances. And so I went to dinner that night with the 2 artistic directors, and I must have told that story about meeting Howard Davies. We were talking about who I knew in British theater, and they said, well, would you ever come and work here? I said, ask. And
you got an idea?
A week and a half later, I get a phone call from Jonathan Kent, who is the artistic director, and he said, what about Iceman Cometh with Howard Davies directing? And I went, of course I have to say yes to this, because we have this unfinished business. And as it turned out, Howard had unfinished business with this play. He had directed it 24 years ago at the National Theater with Ian Holm in the role of Hickey. And this was what's become a rather famous production where Mr. Holm had a nervous breakdown in previews and never went on. He was found cowering in his dressing room and not only didn't go on in that production, didn't go on in the theater for 22 years. And then, of course, subsequently did movies and became a great actor. And subsequently did King Lear in the theater. But so it really was to work with Howard that I was drawn to do this American play in a little theater in London.
But let me ask this: does what happened to Ian Holm suggest that this is something that can? I mean, you really have to have a strong constitution to take on Hickey. There is a 26-minute monologue in a 4-hour play.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I can understand it. I guess it would depend on where you are in your own personal makeup, and whether you, I understand that Ian Holm was going through a difficult personal time. So I think that the two kind of sparked something. The play sparked something. I can understand that. I find the play quite beautiful and quite hopeful and uplifting, and ultimately, even though it is about shattering pipe dreams and facing realities, I also think that O'Neill wrote about all of these characters that he knew. I mean, this play is all set in a bar that O'Neill hung out in 1912, and where he used to get incredibly drunk and almost tried to commit suicide there, and was discovered by one of the characters in the play named Jimmy Tomorrow, who Paul Giamatti plays. This was a very, very significant year in his life. It's curious that he set both Long Day's Journey into Night and this play in the same year, 1912. And I find the play written without judgment. He presents these characters with all their flaws and all their foibles and says, here they are. Here is my take on humanity. And I think it ultimately is about fellowship and about friendship and the incomprehensibility of love and what it asks of us and what it takes from us and what it gives us.
Will you want to, as a result of this, do with O'Neill what Jason Robards did with O'Neill? In a sense, be a defining actor of O'Neill?
I'd love to try. I'd love to try.
I mean, as a kind of successor to O'Neill. I mean, to Jason.
I'd love to try. Listen, nobody's going to walk in Jason's shoes.
I understand that.
But I'd love to try more O'Neill. I'd love to try to do Moon, Touch of the Poet. There's beautiful plays.
What is it about O'Neill?
Well, I mean, just take Iceman. He wrote this play in 1939. set it in 1912, so he set it back in the psychology of 1912. And yet, it's pre-Freud, really pre-AA. AA began in 36, but there were about 5 people in it, probably by 39. And yet, here it is in 1999, and this play is resonating with audiences because he was way ahead of his time. He was ahead of his time in terms of AA. He was ahead of his time in terms of how we view each other, our own psychology, the way in which we deal with each other. There isn't a character up there on the stage that audiences don't recognize in themselves, in their families. You just know these guys, and you know that somewhere in you these guys exist. And, you know, that's astounding. You know, it's, you go see a modern play sometimes, and it's, you know, it's disposable. It's here and it's gone. But this man wrote with such clarity, beauty, rhythm. That's the thing that astounds me most, and I think surprises audiences is how fast the play goes by. There's a musicality to it. There's a rhythm. There's an energy. There's it's just, I think people can't believe 4 hours go by.
Do you understand a lot more about it today than you did when you began in London?
Yeah.
I mean, do you get it differently today?
I'm continually reminded of what it reaches for. There hasn't really been a night where it hasn't moved me in some way. I remember early on in performances, Howard gave me a note about the speech that you referred to earlier, the long confession that Hickey has in Act 4, and he said, you know, you were a bit more. You were sort of more angry at yourself last night, and you got a little more of this, and I think, and I said, you know, Howard, you're absolutely right. You're noticed correct, but I think it's going to be like that. I think the one thing that I want to try to do in this is at whatever level I'm at, emotionally night to night, that's where I'm going to be. I want to be honest about this. I don't want to have to try to reach some level of emotion each night, because if I'm not there, and I think I have to reach that, and I'm not able to get there, I'm going to drive myself crazy, and it's going to take me out of the play. So wherever I am, on any given night, if it's more angry, if it's more self-pitying, if it's more humorous, that's where it's going to be. I have to trust that. And we've also done that particular act in a way where it's not really staged. So I move around the stage, I go different places, I sit at different chairs, I go to different people.
You mean night to night?
Night to night, because it keeps it from being a set piece for me, and it also keeps everyone on stage who doesn't have a great deal of dialogue, but they are involved in an ongoing conversation. Keeps them very alert. They don't know where I'm going.
Did it teach you, I mean, does it change you, I mean, you take home this something that will make a difference in your life? Other than the fact that you have played the role.
Yes, there are upsides to what it teaches you, and then there's the downside, which is that now this becomes the benchmark. Now what am I going to do? I don't know what in the heck I'm going to do after this, because the standard that this sets for yourself in all areas is so high, and yet it kind of achieved it in a sort of effortless way.
Now, will you then, so suppose someone comes along now. You've got 3 movies coming out, right?
Yes.
American Dream.
American Beauty. Ordinary Decent Criminal.
Right.
And a film that we believe will be called Convention, that's from a stage play called Hospitality.
But these were set in motion before you undertook Iceman Cometh, I would assume. No?
No.
You did them after you started?
In fact, all 3 of these films, 2 of them came to me while we were in London.
Yeah.
And then the 3rd one, which is one I did for my company, I decided to do.
But have you shot them already?
Rehearsal. Yeah, they're all done.
While you were doing Iceman Cometh?
I squeezed in 2 of them from the time we closed in London to starting rehearsals here, and then while I was rehearsing for the first 3 weeks here, I shot a movie downtown at night.
Okay, suppose somebody comes to you after you've had in July when this production ends. If it does end in July,
well,
right?
It better come to me before July.
All right. Well, now, suppose you don't have anything to do. I mean, are you going to go nuts? If suppose, in a sense, nothing, lots of stuff will come your way, but maybe nothing you really like. You haven't seen anything. There is no another Iceman Cometh, say, right now, and there's no great film that turns you on. Can you just relax for a while and not do anything?
Yes. Yes, in fact, I may well, in fact, just take a break, because I've been going pretty nonstop for a while. And this play has demanded a lot. It's been thrilling and exhilarating and energizing, but it's demanded a lot. And then there's a lot of, you know, there's the play every night, but then there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing for students, a lot of stuff I'm doing in trying to get the word out about this season and what's happening in theater.
What are you doing for students?
Well, what we've done to try to reach an audience that would never otherwise come is we did this ticket policy where we economically tried to figure out, all right, this is an impossible play to produce. It's a cast of 19, which is expensive.
Right.
We're in overtime every night with the unions.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons why this play is rarely done, and particularly on Broadway. So I said, look,
Raise the ticket prices.
let's raise the ticket prices, only so that we can subsidize student seats. So we have 141 student seats every night.
You and your dreams, finally. Since this is about dreams and goals and ambition and living with who you are and what you've become, I mean, have most of your dreams, because of this and because of what you've been able to do in film, been fulfilled?
Professional dreams. Sure.
Professional.
Yeah. I mean, I'm, you know, I'm able to, gosh, go every night and do this incredible play that's rarely done, and work with a group of actors that are everything I ever dreamed that doing a play and being a member of a company could be. I've learned a lot in the last 15 or so years about what it takes to be a member of an ensemble, and what it takes to be a part of that kind of leadership with a director. Because Howard and I really, we led this in a certain particular way that I think makes a gigantic difference in terms of how people come to work every day and know that their contribution is valuable. So it's like a little community, you know. It's like, wow, this is what when I was at school and I thought, wow, this is...
But, okay, so that's theater. I mean, you can't get any better than this, right? The right play, the right part, the right response. How about film? Are you doing it? Are you finding the kind of things you want to do in film? Or are you just simply being a marketable, in-demand actor because of the quality of your performance?
Well, I mean, I'm in demand to a certain degree with certain studios, but I'm not in demand with all of them. And there's, I think, many people who don't quite know what to do with me. They haven't quite figured out what I mean, I want to also do different things, you know. I don't want to do the things I've done before in film, just as I don't want to do the things I've done before in theater. So I'm always looking for the thing that's going to challenge me and take me to a new place. The hardest thing to do is convince the people that are either directing those kind of films or producing those kind of films that I can do it. So it's a constant, I mean, if you're not interested in settling on I'll show up and do my little turn and, you know, what they expect of me, I'll keep playing these kind of parts. So I'm not doing that. So my answer has always been, when I get to a point where I say I can't do that anymore, is to go back to the theater. So I hope, as in each case that's happened in my life, when I've come out of the theater, I've found a new plateau and a new place to go in film. But it's only, on some level, what you can fight for and what they're willing to take a chance on. It's always about a director saying, no, I want him. And Sam Mendes in American Beauty said, I want him. And it's a very different kind of role.
I know directors will say, if I don't get him, I'm not making the movie. They feel so strongly about him and a part, or her and a part.
That we were talking earlier off camera about Alan Pakula, and that's a perfect example of the first film director that ever fought for me and changed the way that the studios looked at me. I mean, up to that point, I was this kind of obscure New York stage actor that they'd never heard of, and he fought for me for a film, and because of him, I ended up having a film career. I wouldn't without him.
You said, when I asked about dreams, you said professionally, yes. Does that mean that there, personally and privately, there are things that are unfulfilled for you?
Yeah, I think I've focused and concentrated on my work for a very long time. It was, it was my choice. It's been hard on relationships. It's been, it's difficult when you're traveling around so much too. It's just hard on friendships, let alone, if you're involved in a real relationship. But if one is going to begin a family, which I think is something I'm leaning toward, then I think you really have to be willing to take that time. I mean, and say, I'm going to do this. As you know, there have been many people over the last couple of years that, you know, we never thought would get married and have kids who are, you know, blossoming families. And so I think that that's a personal goal of mine, because I think I'd make a pretty good father.
I suspect you would. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Kevin Spacey, Iceman, coming through July. It's a pleasure, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.